Thank you so much for that introduction, Pierce. Everyone, I'm so glad that you're here with us this evening. I felt so excited seeing that participant number growing and growing in the minutes just after 7 o'clock here in New York. And I'm just so excited to talk to Anton and Bora both. And to begin, at Bora's request, we have Anton reading a passage from Your Utopia. So Anton, I would love to invite you to take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Oh, great way to begin. Thank you, Hannah. Um, I have completely forgotten what section Bora asked me to read. So I am going to open the book to a random place and start reading and hope that we reach some kind of natural conclusion to yeah. Okay. Well, this is a story called A Song for Sleep, and it's about an elevator, a smart elevator. And this is the story that when I first read it, it made me cry at the end, and I was like, why am I crying at an elevator? But when you read the story, you'll see. Okay, so this is told from the elevator's perspective. One person boarded. Identity check. Please hold. Check complete. New tenant at unit 5305. Gender, woman. Age, 93. Destination, no destination found. Schedule, no schedule found. Music, no music library found. Content, no content found. This is unprecedented. Every resident needs to sync their personal information with both their unit and the whole building when they move in. Blood pressure, heart rate, pre-existing medical conditions, pharmaceutical and other medical needs, schedules, including work commutes and grocery shopping, the kinds of content they enjoy, including music and advertisements, their shopping lists, and anything else their devices at home collect. But the new resident at 5305 has no information on record. No schedule, music, cultural content, preferred brands, nothing. Perhaps she hasn't synced her information yet. I log on to the device hub at 5305. Of this meager data, I note that it's the washing machine that clocks the most use. I start playing a laundry detergent advertisement on the content screen of my interior. The detergent ad plays, and then a foodstuff ad starts up, but the resident has still not mentioned the destination. Where would you like to go? I ask. Because she has no preferred content indicated, I do not know which voice to use with her. So I fall back on my default voice setting, which is neutral male of unknown age. Oh, like me. The resident of 5305 doesn't answer. I wait the preset response time of 10 seconds. Just when I'm about to ask again, the resident of 5305 places her hand on one of my walls next to my door. Her fingers brush over the surface. The wall softly lights up. She pats the wall now with one hand, looking as if she's searching for something. When her palm comes down on the wall, the light of the wall dims. Her arm is still in the air. She slightly retracts her arm. Sighing lightly, she says in a near whisper, "Please take me to B8. So I begin to move. When I reach the 8th level underground, I open my doors. B8, I say. Have a pleasant day. The resident of 5305 slowly and carefully walks out of the doors. But before she steps outside, she says again, in her whispered voice, "Thank you." Why would a human touch the wall of an elevator? This is a question I ask to the all-knowing great nest of objects. The nest searches the net that connects the whole world and returns to me the results. On daily life, warning message for drunk users or misbehaving minors, download. On accidents, malfunctions, and emergencies, sickness, physical, sickness, mental. The results are varied, but none of them answer my question. The resident of 5305 is not a minor. She has not been in an accident or suffered any other emergency. She may be of advanced age, but her heart rate and blood pressure were normal, and she showed no symptoms associated with problems in physical or mental health. I keep searching. I eliminate results that overlap with the all-knowing nests and eliminate the repeating results that I've already eliminated. After a bit of a delay, the all-knowing nest proposes the following result. History of machines. Before objects communicated through the nest, Elevators featured buttons with floor numbers on them for the passengers to push to indicate where they are going. That's it. Now I understand why the resident of 5305 was touching the wall. The all-knowing Nest adds, this is not a method of use that is currently available, and therefore it is impossible to respond the way the user wishes. But it is always possible to respond the way the user wishes, as long as the user's wish is received the right way, that is.
Thank you, Anton. Such a lively reading. And that actually was the correct story. So you chose well. Um, Bora, I found this book to be so full of surprises. I feel like that's true for both of your books, which I read, in preparation of this event and also a previous interview that we did a couple weeks ago for Kirkus Reviews. I feel like one of the really wonderful, delightful surprises in this book, oh yay, both books, is the surprising point of view. Like Anton mentioned in his intro that this story, A Song for Sleep, is written from the point of view of an elevator. And we've also talked about the title story of the collection, Your Utopia, which is from the point of view of another robot. Can you tell us a little bit about how you made that choice and point of view?
Uh, I wrote most of these stories, well, all of these stories while I was teaching, and I taught a science fiction class every spring from 2013 to 2021. So every spring I would discuss what it means to be human, what it means to have a sense of self, what would happen if we developed machines that could think like us, because we are developing machines that could think like us. What happens if the machines start to have a sense of self the way we do? And at least 1/3 of my students were engineering majors, and they were actually taking classes on software engineering, AI, those kind of things. So they gave me, like, each semester, they gave me fresh information about where we are with AI technology and what we're doing with trying to make machines think more like human beings. So that was the focus of that class every single year in the spring semester. So I thought a lot about that, and I thought it would be really interesting to write something from the point of view of a machine that has a sense of self, and make decisions on its own, and is programmed to feel or guess the feelings of human beings the way human beings do. And it's not exactly a new idea. There are, like, the famous movie AI. That's the from the point of view of a machine that looks like which looks like a small boy who wants to be a real boy. So it's not a new idea, but one thing I learned from that class is that machines look less and less like human beings. They can think more and more like human beings, but whatever machines we have around us have no similarity in terms of appearance with human beings, and that is for our convenience, because they just perform whatever function they're supposed to perform, and they don't necessarily have to look like human beings who operate the machines. They just look like machines, and they just operate. So it's more interesting to have machines that look like machines, don't look like human beings or androids at all, but think like human beings. It's just the discrepancy is more interesting. So I wanted to use that.
And I think what's so wonderful about these stories where these robots are in these very non-human forms is that you're thinking about how they think, but also there's a sense of feeling from these robots. Like in my notes, I wrote empathetic robots. And Anton, you mentioned before reading that this story made you cry. Can you tell us a little bit more about just your first experience with the stories that made up your utopia and just how you felt as you were going through them?
Yeah, I think like if you look at the Korean edition of the book, its title is To Meet Her, which is the story in Your Utopia. And also it has like the trans flag colors. And it's like very clearly signals like that it has like a um anti-transphobic message. And so yes, that's what the Korean cover looks like. So I was expecting, you know, some kind of like trans narrative, and indeed there is. But also I think the reason why we decided to go with Your Utopia as the title instead and kind of like center the robot in the thing is because like, well, yes, there are more robot characters in the book, but there's also this idea of where do we draw, like who do we include in the definition of humanity? And there's so much transphobia right now that there's so much blatant disregard for trans rights and trans people that clearly right now the debate is, do we include trans people like in our definition of humanity? Obviously, the answer is yes, unequivocally. But the fact that this is still controversial is quite damning of our human condition today. And the idea behind this book, because science fiction is about like bringing ideas to their natural conclusion, is that okay, so like what other things can we include as human if a robot behaves this way, even though, as Bora said, it's outside, it's designed for our convenience. Is it still a human being? I mean, there are other things that we thought were designed for a sort of master's convenience, like slaves or other kind of other humans that we considered were non-human or below subhuman. So this book I feel is part of like an ongoing debate, an ongoing discourse on what it means to be like, who do we include in our definition of humanity? And how, and because once we include someone in our definition of humanity, the way that we treat them is different. Because it's my belief that we give people things, their humanity, like it has to be given to you by other people. You can't really, you should claim it for yourself, but the way that humanity as a concept works is that it's given to you by others. And it's something that we discover in each other. And so this book is like an exploration of that. Like, what if, like, how do we give humanity to trans people? How do we give humanity to um, environmentalists, I guess, the tree people at the end in Seed? How do we give people to, like, how do we give humanity to these robots who think and feel as we do?
I love that. I didn't know the context of the Korean edition, and it's really, really fascinating to hear about like how a book can be sort of reframed in that way. Was that a collaborative decision for the two of you to come up with the title for the English edition and kind of the framework for it, or how did that go? Bora, you're shaking your head.
I don't interfere with that process. The cover and the title is the first thing that a reader meets when they see a book. So it's completely in the realm of marketing. And I have no sense, if you stay long enough in grad school, like they um counter engineer you to like be as far away from marketing as possible, especially if you major in literature. So like I know that I have a very screwed sense of marketing, and whatever I say, like it'll go the opposite way. It's not going to be appealing to any reader in the world. So I shut up and I let the experts decide.
So the reason we changed the title and well, really the title is my fault because while I do love To Meet Her as a story, I thought as a book title, like there's something about the grammatical using the infinite, like to meet her or its alternate title, which was Meeting Her. I just really did not want to start a title with a gerund because I always think that's ugly for some reason because I'm very old-fashioned. And even an infinitive, it's kind of like, oh, to meet her. It just feels so like awkward. And it doesn't sound as pretty as it does in Korean because Korean grammar is prettier. And so I was like, okay. So we presented like different options, like on morning after Bora's author's afterward, because I think the book is also kind of about mourning. But I think ultimately I really like the irony and the sarcasm of Your Utopia. It's like your utopia, you know? So I thought it felt both hopeful and sarcastic and ominous at the same time. So that's kind of like the title that it was a group decision between the UK editors, me, and the US editors. Like it was a team effort.
It's so fascinating. I really love this title, and I do think that this book is hopeful. Um, and Bora and Anton, both of you really put, I feel like, your hearts and souls into the literature, but also into how you live and how you engage and think about politics. And I really love that Pierce had said in her intro, like that this series is about politics and literature and engaging with languages. Um, I don't know, Bora, can you tell us about how, through your very creative mind, you take these real life experiences that you read about in the news or you see, and how you sort of twist them into this um, science fiction, speculative fiction world? I think it's such a fascinating process, and I would love to hear about it.
Um, I hope people notice that in this book, human beings, like general humans, including I think just generic humans without any markers. So people who are not specified as LGBTQI or disabled or women or minority, just generic humans. They eat each other, they kill each other, and people who are marked as transgender or LGBTQI or tree people, indigenous people, minorities, they will thrive and prosper, and they have hope, and they say they're happy, and they are actually leading happy lives. So that's my wish. That's my hope for the future that the indigenous people, the minorities, the marginalized will be happy. I hope they will be happy, while the generic people who are the majority are eating each other because that's what we're doing.
Oh, I love that. Um, and you write that into being, that existence into being. And I feel like that's really something so magical about science fiction and speculative fiction, that you can imagine these different worlds. And I found it so moving, as a reader going through this book. I sense that there is such trust between you two. I think of you truly as collaborators. Um, and I would love to hear more about the translation process, and Bora, like how you how you think about your collaboration with Anton, and yeah, just what is that relationship like for you two?
He just popped up out of nowhere one day, and he got me on the short list for the International Booker Prize, and uh, uh, he made me one of the finalists for the National Book Awards. So, yeah, Anton is amazing, and I do as he says.
I think like it's very nice of her to say, but like writing is solitary. Um, like you don't have to publish what you write. But translation is always collaborative. Like even if you don't publish your translation, you have to work with the author. Like let's say you have a dead author, then you're still working with their text. So it's still a very, very highly collaborative process. Publishing, especially if you're translating and publishing is a highly collaborative process with a lot of input and a lot of notes from editors, marketers, like from everyone in the publishing house, from booksellers. So I, as a translator, you go into it expecting this to be collaborative. And that's kind of like the attitude that we have. Not all authors are like have that are as like ready to collaborate. Bora is highly trained in literary theory, and she refuses to deny any theory that I have, any speculation that I have about her work. She's like, you know, Anton, if that's true for you, then that's just true, and there's nothing you can say to convince me that there's any kind of authorial intent or whatever otherwise. Like she had one note for Curse Bunny before going in. She had like an original verb in the Korean edition that she had to change because of the Korean editor. And she was like, can you change that verb back to what I wanted in the English translation? I was like, okay. And that was like her only like request going in, and I did. Your Utopia, like there wasn't even that. And for the most part, I'm kind of notorious for not talking to my authors about their works as I work on them because I feel like my authors are really great and I understand everything what they're saying, so I don't need to ask them. And also from the author's point of view, I feel like if your translator's asking you questions, I think it's some authors are going to be like, oh, I'm so reassured that my translator is going through all this due diligence. But on the other hand, they're like, am I a bad author? Is that why my translator does not understand my writing, my own translator? And the other thing is, quite often you're working on books that they've worked on like years and years before, and they're working on something else, and they don't remember. They're like, I don't remember what I was thinking when I was writing this. So you just like make something up. Like that is a very, very frequent like thing that I see. So at this point, I'm like, I'm not gonna ask my authors. And and sometimes I'm just too lazy because sometimes I'll see something that's like obviously like an editorial mistake or whatever, and I'm like, well, I don't want to make it seem like I'm rubbing my author's face in it. So I'm just gonna like assume this is a mistake and then like correct it in the translation. Because for the most part, readers do not have the privilege of a translator hovering over their shoulder and telling them like why they did something the way that they did. And they're not going to compare it against the source. I mean, some nerds do, but like those are nerds, so who cares about what they think? So my theory is always like, okay, I think my plumber is here. My theory is always like I should. So for the benefit of the audience listening at home, my pipes burst in my balcony, and he told me that he would come half an hour from now, which by then our session would be over, but he is here now. So if I'm kind of like in and out, please understand that that is what is going on. Anyway, that is my entire philosophy of talking to the author while I translate.
I totally understand, Anton, about house stuff. Thank you for sharing so much of your insights. And Bora, you're also a literary translator from the Polish and the Russian into Korean. What is that? How do you conceive of? I mean, how do you conceive of language? I feel like it's really mind-boggling to me as somebody who only like I would say, speaks and reads Korean, to have so much space for so many languages. And I wonder kind of, what your philosophy is like in your own translations. I know that the ideas in this book are also kind of present in some of the translations that you've been working on.
Um, so translation and literature itself are two very different things. as a translator, I know that do not interfere with your translator. If you mess with your translator, it's gonna get worse. So yeah, leave them alone. And also, I mostly translate people who are already deceased. So like I've only translated like once in my past. I've translated one person who was still alive, and I'm doing my second translation of a person who is still alive. So like I don't have that many experience like talking to a live author. So it was really strange when Anton wanted to like translate Curse Bunny at first. Like, I'm still alive. Why are you trying to whatever? So so yeah, and so that was about translation. Translation is, and also you have to be better at the target language than the source language. So it doesn't really matter if you're fluent in Korean or not in your verbal Korean. If you can read it and understand it, and if you're trying to translate it into, let's say, English, and you are much better at speaking and writing in English, then that's the ideal combination. Anton is a native speaker in Korean, and his English is, you can hear his English. So and there are so many talented Korean English translators now. And you have to understand that you have to be better at your target language than the source language. And whatever the translator reads is right. That's what I think. And that's how you get like many versions of the same book, and these translations talk to each other, and the readers have a preference, or they can discuss, and that goes on a lot, very often in the academic world. So I've seen that a lot, like whose translation of Tolstoy do you choose? Whose translation of Dostoevsky do you choose? And professors like discuss hours and hours about this one word translated into like so many different words in English and whatever. So yeah, that's a realm, that's a field on its own, and it enriches literature, I believe. As a writer, my knowledge in Polish and Russian completely ruined my Korean, because I now like shamelessly write very weird Korean sentences, and my editors hate it. And they're like, you do not say that in Korean like this. And I'm like, but they say that in Polish. Like, why can't can the Poles say it? And I, as a Korean, cannot say it. That's unfair. I'm gonna say it in Korean like this. And my editor's like, no. But yeah, now Anton is world famous, and he likes my sentences. So like, so it doesn't matter.
That is so interesting that your knowledge of Polish has kind of twisted your Korean. And I think I love that, because what excites me when I'm reading English is novel turns of phrase, new ways of using the language. And I feel like that's what you must be doing in the Korean. And Anton, I feel jealous that you read the original Korean and then bring Bora's work to us. Can you tell us just, when you're translating Bora's work, what do you want English readers to understand about like Bora's style, her tone, and her prose? I truly wish that I could read Korean well enough to read the original.
Yeah, I think Bora's style needs to be contextualized within all of Korean literature, because I think she really is very unique. Korean writers tend to be very like sometimes over polished, and we love that. We love how overachieving Korean writers are. Bora is also like super sophisticated, but she is much more unafraid to show roughness and energy. And when we think of a genius, we think of someone who has the confidence in which they know that they will be understood. Like, that's what a genius is, right? And so Bora writes with that kind of confidence. She's like, I don't care if things are not like super like pretty. You know, I want this texture, I want this energy, I want all of these different sometimes grotesque. It says something about the grotesque that's like because it's like a twist on the simply beautiful that makes it much more interesting. Like Bora is much more concerned with being interesting than she is with being pretty. And that's what I really, really love about her work. Whereas a lot of Korean work, I think, is very, very carefully written and not as like, you know, super adventurous when it comes to style. Like there is a bit of a convergence of style when it comes to like all of Korean literature. And that's because Bora became like she's mainstream now, but even now she's kind of like considered very, very kind of like in the margins. But definitely before I translated her, she was considered completely outside of the mainstream. No one called her like because there's a literary writer licensing system in Korea. And if you don't come through the licensing system, then it means that you're not legitimate somehow. Yeah. So we have a very, very weird system that I cannot go into because it's way too complicated. But Bora did not come through that system. She does not have a poetic license, even though she has, you know, a PhD in literature and a master's from Yale. Like that doesn't count in Korea. So yeah, I think her style has to be understood in the context of that. Like she is not like her style is really, really like diverges from the mainstream. And that's what I really love about it. That's where like the energy comes from it. And I knew that it would hit in English in translation because, you know, American readers don't care about, you know, the Korean poetic licensing system. Like, you know, they only want, you know, a story that is well written, where the language is interesting and the story is interesting. And that's what English readers care about. And lo and behold, it was true because, you know, right out of the gate, Cursed Bunny won a Penheim grant. And that's when I was like, yes, I knew it would hit, but it's so nice to have validation like this.
Oh my gosh, the energy, the texture, it really, really comes through. And I think that is what thrilled me so much about reading your books, Bora. I actually had a nightmare when I was reading Cursed Bunny. I called out in the middle of the night, help. And I was like, I hope my neighbors didn't hear that. But it's because these stories are so precise and they work their way into our minds and our consciousness because they have so much to say about the issues that plague us. I heard you two speak at the New York Public Library in November, and Bora, you said that you write about the things that disturb you. Um, and you know, I'm very curious about that you know the marginalization that Anton had referred to. I wonder if your very clear politics have anything to do with that because even the cover of To Meet Her, the you know Korean original of Your Utopia, it is very, very, very bold to put that much care and emphasis on a trans character in Korea. I feel like that's even true in America right now, just because of the political climates that our countries are in. Can you tell us just about working those politics into your work? It's such a big part of the author's note that really I found so moving as a reader to find at the end of the book. So I would love to hear about you know your politics and your literature together.
Your Utopia is the first time, this is my first attempt at trying to integrate whatever politics I have or anarchism I have into my fiction. And as for the Korean cover, I don't think there's that much awareness in Korea even. So people who recognize the color of the flag will recognize it, but it'll be a very small portion of the reading public, and most of them will just see a cover with some colors, and they won't even they won't even have a special interest in it. So there, it wasn't bold. It was, I was calculating that people who recognize it will recognize it. I hope this empowers them. I hope this is some kind of solace to them. But people who are not interested, or the phobes, are just, they won't care. So and with the politics, now, well, while I was still teaching in school, I was afraid that I might lose my job. So I tried to like separate the protesting Bora and teaching Dr. Chung, but now I quit, and I quit, so nobody can sack me anymore. So I think I'm kind of, yeah, now I'm like, nobody can stop me. I'm gonna protest, and I'm gonna write about my protests. So I actually wrote a book of essays about protesting, and it's coming out in Korea in April. And I wrote a whole book about how I fell in love with my husband, who was the leader of my labor union, and how we like camped outside the National Assembly together, not just as our labor union, to enact this law for adjunct professors. And then like there are some other protests involved in the story. So now I'm just beginning to find a way to make things fun and interesting, and not fall into the trap of making my stories sound like a sociology research paper, because that would be boring. These are real people, and things in real lives are happening to them, and they didn't ask for it. It's not their fault, but there are people who are constantly like really being pushed to the edge, to the cliff of society, for no reason at all. And it breaks my heart, and I want to do something about it. And I want to convey the emotional experience to the reader, not the political situation per se, but the emotional situation and the whole process of going through that emotional journey. And I think that's the realm of literature, conveying that emotional journey, the emotional process, and what comes with all the unwanted adventure. And I think that's what literature can do, and I'm trying to find more creative ways to convey that to as many readers as I can.
That's so powerful. And it's true that I felt very emotional reading this book. Yeah, and Anton, I feel like, well, first, before I go to Anton, I just want to invite people to ask questions. I see some coming in, but we're going to switch to questions from the audience very soon. But yeah, Anton, I feel like well, both of you wear your belief in liberation and human liberation on your sleeves. Um, it's very much a part of your work as well. The first book that I read that you translated was Park Sang-young's Love in the Big City. Um, and I think the emotional payoff truly is for all of these books. It's in the delight, the poignancy. So yeah, I just would love to hear about, you know, how your politics affect your work too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't know why my plumber is washing my veranda now. Anyway, so the like Love in the Big City especially, and also my first published translation, which is 창세기, Genesis by Jeon Sam-hae, which is available to read in Words Without Borders. It was very, very crucial to me that I talk about queer Korean literature, because so many times I would talk about queer Korean literature and people would be like, Korea has queer literature, or like there are queer people in Korea, like, you know, ridiculous crap like that. When in fact, Korea actually has a very, very rich history of queer literature. Like, you know, it goes back, you know, hundreds of years. So for me, it was very crucial to bring that out and not, I'm sorry to say, like the churchy stuff that a lot of unfortunately like Korean Americans who are of that nature very, very focusing on. So for me, I had a very, very clear political agenda to highlight queer literature, Korean queer literature, and Love in the Big City is kind of like an aspect of that. And and also speculative literature, because I think a lot of Korean politics are best expressed in speculative literature. For example, there's of course Bora Chung, there's Squid Game, like all of these like very, very impactful works are actually extremely political and anti-capitalist. Um, and to me, being a writer always meant that you have to speak out. Like you have to speak out about genocide. Like there are certain things that you can be like, oh, there's a difference in opinion. And some things are like, no, this is just wrong. And genocide is one of those things. Like the death penalty, I feel like there's really no way to justify the death penalty. It just seems like it seems just so vindicative and so like there's no point to it. And so I think if you're a writer, you do have the obligation to speak out. You can't be neutral. Like there's no neutrality for certain issues. And so for me, it was very important to when I was making my artistic decisions to have those politics at hand. I actually had no idea what Bora's politics were when I picked up Cursed Bunny. It was hilarious because when I followed her on Twitter, she's not on Twitter anymore, but she tweeted, "Oh no, my translator has followed me on Twitter. He's going to see all of my demonstrations." And until I followed Bora on Twitter, I had no idea there were so many political demonstrations going on in Seoul, like at any one time. Because she would be going to one like every weekend. She couldn't go during the week for the most part because she has to like teach. But every weekend she would be going to these protests. I'd be like, there's a protest for this, there's a protest for this. And I'm like, what? And like the second time I ever met her in real life was we were walking down Sejongno, I believe, in near Gwanghwamun, where because we were in the Seoul Pride, Seoul Queer Parade, and like this lady comes up and she's like, and then she like runs away. And my husband goes, "Who's that?" And I was like, "Oh, I think that was Bora Chung." I wasn't sure because it was so quick. And then my husband goes, "Oh my God, she has such great energy." And I was like, yeah. So, but I had no idea what her politics were and what any of that was. But now if you look back, like only a person with her politics could create literature this strong, this powerful, and this moving. And I feel like they really go like hand in hand. Like you can't have one without the other.
Oh, amen to that. So let's move to audience questions. We have some great ones coming in. So everyone, please don't feel shy because this is your chance to ask these two, in my opinion, geniuses about their incredible creative work. So this is a question from Hee-young. What was something in your utopia that Korean readers were not that interested in, but American readers paid attention to or really liked about, or vice versa? And I guess it's been out for a little over a week now. So I'm curious to hear like what you've been hearing from like American readers.
The same person asked me a question that I was trying to answer. I thought I could like write down the answer, but I think yeah, sorry. So to answer that question, Korean readers were not that interested in the book. I think the queer community noticed because in 2021, when the book came out, in November of that year, the slogan sounded very similar to the title of the author's afterword. So I hope they noticed that somebody is an ally. But other than that, I don't really see like I didn't really see any active interest in this book, but from the American readers, everybody liked the elevator. Everybody liked the elevator. And, yeah, everybody liked the elevator, and everybody liked the smart car. But I know Americans love their cars, so I was expecting that first, and not that much like emotional support for the elevator. But yeah, everybody loves the elevator. So yes, and I'm sorry, I think I feel like I should answer the first question.
Sure.
Anton added additional layers of meanings to original Korean manuscript. Uh, Adding additional layers always happen. That's part of translation. That's part of what translation is, and it's not necessarily right or wrong unless it completely screws the story, which rarely happens. And in case of Anton's translation, I've never seen it. And in terms of grammar, Korean doesn't really specify gender. So I can go on for a whole novel without specifying the gender of the narrator or the central character. I can just go on using their names over and over again, and it'll not sound weird. But in English, you have to have a gendered pronoun. And if I kept saying, well, Anton did, Anton that, Anton this, like without using a pronoun, that I will sound weird. So Anton had to give a gender to a robot or an elevator or a tree, or whatever he had to translate for Anton. And in Crispani, I think he gave a he assigned female gender to number one. And Anton, I think Anton at some point like asked me or something, and I'm like, I don't know. It's a robot. Uh, it's a machine that doesn't have any gender. Do whatever you want. And in the French Curse Bunny, the same robot is a male. So things happen, and the translator, I told you, you have to be more proficient in your target language, which means you know which pronouns or which gender will sound more natural to the general readers, the average reader. So that's the part I trust about the translator. And both are right. And it's a damn machine. I don't know the gender.
For the record, I use non-gender, gender-neutral they for the tree people and for some of the robots, I believe. Like for this robot, I think I use gender-neutral.
My
So
Colombian
fascinating.
translator chose her own stories from a different set of books, and she asked me like, "What's the gender of your dragon?" And I'm like, "What?" So yeah, I don't know.
So interesting. This is a great question that came in from Soren. How do you construct your utopian universes? As an author, do you notice differences in utopias constructed by women versus utopias constructed by men? Are there differences you notice within the authorial world in utopias written in other literary translations versus Korean written utopias?
Oh my goodness. I wrote my doctoral thesis on literary utopias and socialist utopias and specific. So I can go on a whole semester lecturing about this. Utopias constructed by women. There was a very famous one in the 90s that was translated into Korean. The Korean title was The Daughters of Igalia. And it's by a Swedish author, I think. one of the Scandinavian countries, and she reversed the patriarchal order. So in the land of Igalia, where everybody is equal, the women have hegemony, and the women do, like, they have public birthing ceremonies where they give birth in public and everybody applauds and stuff. And they celebrate their first period, the first menstruation, and they body shame boys for not having menstruation, and those kind of things. And you can see one gender having hegemony over the other, and over all others, is ridiculous and very violent and very painful. So that was famous as a very famous feminist novel, and I think it's still on the market in Korea. And like, it's been a center of so much controversy in Korea. But anyways, that's a totally different story. So that's the most famous example of utopia constructed by a woman writer that I can think of in Korea. And it's mostly a criticism of the current world, the current order of patriarchy and capitalism. Whereas utopia is constructed by male. I can go all the way from Thomas More to a whole lot of communities, utopian communities, and the Russian Revolution. And all the history of utopian thought and the history of utopian literature is just dominated by men. And they're very, very well known. And in reality, a whole lot of French people emigrated to the US in the early 19th century to construct like real utopian communes. And they all fell apart within 3 years. So that should tell you something. Yeah, human beings are just not compatible with utopias. We are imperfect beings, and we are not we are not designed to live in a perfect society. And with our small brains and our flawed minds, we cannot design a perfect society for ourselves. We're doomed.
But the book does actually serve as sort of a balm, despite, the inevitable doom of humanity. I have been recommending it to so many friends who have been feeling despair and sorrow. I feel like it acknowledges these realities in this very smart, empathetic way. So I thank you for that. Oh my goodness, thank you so much to you two for sharing so much of your intellect and your creativity with us. For those in the audience, I strongly, strongly recommend that you get both of Bora's books. Please get them from Brookline Booksmith, Cursed Bunny and Your Utopia. And then Anton's novel is coming out in July. It's called Toward Eternity. And I strongly encourage you to pre-order it now, get that buzz going. And if you're able to pre-order it from Brookline Booksmith. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. There are so many places where you could be, and to talk with these authors and to hear about their amazing minds is I think such a privilege, and I feel so grateful. Thank you so much, Bora and Anton, and to Pierce at Brookline Booksmith.